Peter Schrager, darn fine to see you in the lead up to the draft. We're 10 days out. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling very good about where things are at, but also excited for the unknown. And Peter, I think your column with the comments from Gil Brandt, I could echo those. It looks like there's going to be some chalk up top, but that's not necessarily how it's going to go in this draft.
You know, as I was sort of trying to figure out exactly why I feel so stupid right now, this one thought occurred to me. It isn't necessarily just that there's so many players who are going to be in the top, let's say 50. By my count, 10 or 11 guys who could be in the top 50 who didn't play football last year. And so it isn't only that, but it's also the simple fact that there are a lot of new general managers at the top of the draft who basically people don't get much of a read from. Detroit with Brad Holmes, obviously, and Atlanta, with Fontenot, formerly of the Saints, and it isn't only that. I mean, there are other places where weird
Carolina, things. Denver. I mean, those are all first-year GMs.
Yeah. So again, it's easy to sit here and say, like I said in my column today, we're recording this on Monday. So I said in my column, look, I'm hearing, and I think there's a decent chance that George Paton and the Denver Broncos are going to sign Teddy Bridgewater if they don't draft a quarterback at 9. So is that only because in 2014 he was on the personnel team that took Teddy Bridgewater in Minnesota? Or is it logical because Drew Lock has been just okay and they need, somebody to challenge him there? So you just simply don't know until the whole thing kicks off.
Yeah, and I spoke with a GM this morning, actually, who said this is the year to trade back. And the reason you want to trade back is because of what we expect for next year, where there will be a combine, there will be a pro day, there will be players playing. You'll have all your intelligence in a vacuum that you don't have this year. So this is the wild card year that this might not be your best bet as far as putting your best foot forward, as far as all the data and all the information you want. You're kind of flying blind this year. And if you're not confident or you don't have a gut feeling on a guy, maybe this is the year you just say, you know what, let's load up on next year's draft, or at least we'll have all the information on the guys like we usually do.
I will bet you that one day you'll be having a conversation with John Schneider somewhere, and he'll say to you, just my guess, that, yeah, it definitely had something to do with how much we traded to get Jamal Adams and giving up my one in 2021 because I knew that the draft was just going to be totally uncertain. So look, we'll see how it goes and we'll see what happens. I think, as down as everybody is on Howie Roseman in Philadelphia right now, the cool thing is he could be sitting there with 3 1s next year and he could be the king of the draft.
3 1s. If
you never know.
If Wentz plays 70% of his snaps, it's 3 1s. And if they trade back from 12 to a team who's desperate for Devontae Smith coming up from the 20s or something, he might have 4 1s next year. I'll give you another name. Les Snead, the GM of the Rams, they traded Jalen Ramsey for all these first-round picks. Well, K'Lavon Chaisson was last year's first-round pick. And what are the Jaguars getting with the 26th pick in this year's draft? I would probably rather have Jalen Ramsey, despite all the hysteria everyone made about that trade. It seems like getting the sure thing and the sure factor might be the better move.
Yeah. All right. So let's just go a little bit in order about what you think might happen after Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson. Obviously, this is very, very much a moving target. And just understand that we're recording this 10 days out. Yeah. It's going to drop on Tuesday morning. And, you will not have to feel ashamed of anything you say here, because that weird things are going to happen. But as we speak, there's we're just basically looking at what's going to happen with number 3 with the Trey Lance workout in North Dakota. But I wonder, how solid do you think the 49ers are right now on a player? And do you believe that they still could make a change in their decision, or are they set?
Well, before we get into that, as someone who's had Bryce Petty and Matt Barkley in the first round of his mock drafts in the past, I have no shame or fear about anything at this point. Niners have not made that 100% decision yet. And I think as we speak on this Tuesday morning, I believe Trey Lance might be the more likely guy than Justin Fields at this point. They're out there meeting with him. They don't know all they need to know about Trey Lance yet. And what they do know, I can tell you that there are some people in that building who are captivated by it. This is a guy who was a one-star recruit out of the state of Minnesota, shows up out of a wishbone offense. It comes to North Dakota State, basically only played 17 games and threw 200 passes. So if you are going to truly do the Mahomes, Alex Smith model, and you're going to redshirt him for a year with Jimmy Garoppolo, this might be the guy with the highest ceiling out of everybody. Now, because he went to North Dakota State and because there are not scouts in that building and there's not all this intelligence on him, it's a great unknown. Like if there are flaws in Justin Fields or Mac Jones's game, the scouts on your staff know that. They've got 10 sources in that organization or in that facility who are going to tell you, okay, we like Justin, but here's what I would be worried about. North Dakota State, not that they're selling their guy, but they're not going to come out of the woodwork and say, now, actually, let me explain why you don't want our guy. This could be the ultimate, you know what? Let's just go with the raw product and let's let Kyle Shanahan mold him into everything he is. It is the complete opposite of what Mac Jones is, which you know what the ground is and you probably know what the ceiling is. With Trey Lance, you don't know either. So it depends how frisky they're feeling, but I would think it's Lance or Mac Jones at this point. And I don't see Justin Fields being in that conversation at the moment.
Do you sort of buy what I kind of buy, that Kyle Shanahan is extremely smitten with not only the accuracy? Mac Jones had the most accurate season that a Division I starting quarterback has ever had in NCAA history last year, 77.4%. And he was the most accurate of these five guys in balls that traveled at least 20 yards downfield. I think that fits everything with Kyle Shanahan. And I'm not saying that he goes to bed at night and thinks of the Jimmy Garoppolo overthrow to Emmanuel Sanders in the Super Bowl. But I do think that he is a huge fan, having worked with, he got the best out of Matt Ryan when Matt Ryan had his best year in Atlanta. I think efficiency and accuracy right now with Kyle Shanahan are very big.
Yeah, and look, he had a choice between Kirk Cousins and Robert Griffin III. And Robert Griffin III was the second overall pick, and Kirk Cousins was the fourth round pick. And, of course, his father was the coach, but he was the offensive coordinator. And unanimously between them, by the end of the thing, it was like, all right, Cousins is our guy. And think about those two different types of quarterbacks. And I'm not comparing Fields or Lance to Robert Griffin III, but as far as just accuracy, able to hit the target and be able to run the playbook, Cousins was that guy. Now, Mac Jones has this label now that he's not an athlete or that he's got limited athletic ability. I don't think that's fair. Mac Jones is an incredibly athletic quarterback, just in a different way. Comes from a tennis playing family background where his father was a professional tennis player and his brother and sister both played collegiately at tennis. And Mac, of course, played it as a kid too. And that's footwork. That's lateral movement. That's vision. That is a way to see things at all angles. I think that they value the athleticism of Mac Jones a little differently than some of the other pundits and mock drafts might as well. They don't see him as some stiff who's a statue. They see him as a guy who can negotiate the pocket and do things well. Like I said, the ground, if you're taking him third overall, is Kirk Cousins. What's the ceiling? Well, the ceiling is that you get an accurate quarterback, maybe the best quarterback in accuracy of all time. Like, the dream scenario is you get Drew Brees, right? Like, here's this guy who's not the most athletically gifted, or his body with his shirt off is not going to wow you, but just does not miss passes and is pinpoint. And I think that's a lot more appealing than a Lamar Jackson or even a Tim Tebow or someone who can just move out of the pocket for these guys. I think the Shanahan offense really is based on knowing the playbook, being able to operate that offense, and being precise. As someone once said, there are X's and O's and there are Jimmy and Joe's. And I think it was Jimmy Johnson. In this case, I think the Shanahan offense, give me the X's and O's more so than the Jimmy and Joe's.
Okay, let's go to Atlanta at number 4. New coach Arthur Smith, new general manager Terry Fontenot. What do you hear? What do you think?
I think there's been a lot of buzz about Fields and Lance at 4, but as we get closer to the draft, I think it's going to be Kyle Pitts. The feeling on Kyle Pitts is that he's the best quarterback in this draft. He's a bona fide talent. And if you look at what Arthur Smith had in Tennessee, it was like Anthony Ferkser and Jonnu Smith. And these guys were not all-world talents, but he got the most out of them. Now you surround that.
He loves the tight end.
He does. And you surround that with Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley and Gage and Hayden Hurst. And Matt Ryan could still sling it. There's this misnomer, and you know it, like that the owner is going to be nudging his team, like, one way. I don't see it. And from my conversations with the Atlanta folks, like Arthur Smith is all in on this team. And it means redoing the facility and making sure that Smith and Fontenot have everything they need scouting wise and really rebuilding internally. But I don't think this is Arthur Blank at his age and for what he and Matt Ryan have been through as colleagues and employer and employee. I don't think it's pushing Matt Ryan out the door and starting anew. I still think they look at that roster and they think they can compete with Matt Ryan. I think it's going to be Kyle Pitts, who you've been covering the league a lot longer than I have. Have you ever had a tight end prospect described the way people are describing Kyle Pitts?
No, because what Kyle Pitts is going to force you to do is what a lot of teams used to do with Gronk in his healthy prime, and that is cover him with a corner or, a physical nickel. And I think teams are going to have to make a decision on Kyle Pitts because, look, over the weekend I talked to Kyle Trask about this, and he just said he was so hard to match up against that, usually athletically he was so much better than a safety that at the end of the day, I think most teams are probably going to say, look, if we're in the NFC South, the three opponents in the NFC South, if I was, one of the coaches there, I would be thinking when we play the Atlanta Falcons, if they take Kyle Pitts, we have to get ready to play four corners in this game almost at all times, as weird as that sounds. But I agree with you. I mean, Gil Brandt compared Kellen Winslow, not Junior, but the regular Kellen Winslow to him. And I think that's the last time there's been such a matchup nightmare type tight end come into the league. The one other thing you referred to that I totally agree with, and that is, look, I think that Arthur Blank is looking at this draft and saying, we're never going to be in position to get a quarterback again. Our quarterback is entering his age 36 season this year. We really should take a quarterback maybe. What do you guys think? Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But I'm told absolutely categorically that he's not going to pull, a power play here and tell him I want Trey Lance or I want Justin Fields or whoever. He's going to allow them to make the decision. I mean, can you imagine, Peter, if the day before the draft, Blank calls in his new coach, his new general manager, and says, hey, I know you guys want to take Kyle Pitts, but I want a quarterback, and we're taking a quarterback. Imagine that being the first big decision, for this new coach and this new GM. I just don't see it happening.
No, and, Arthur Smith got the Atlanta job, and it was with very little fanfare. There was not a lot of crazy confetti going around the league, but I could tell you that teams viewed Arthur Smith coming out of Tennessee as like the next Andy Reid, the way he was being discussed about his offensive. Yeah. He interviewed with every team he wanted to. The Jets were very interested in Arthur Smith, went with Robert Saleh, but I think some of that might have been they knew that Smith had other options and might have been going somewhere else. And the Eagles were very interested in Arthur Smith. And of course, it didn't work out there either. But you don't choose to go to Atlanta and then say, we'll take the fourth quarterback on the board, whoever falls to us. Like, I don't see it. And maybe it happens and there's a reason why. And maybe Arthur Smith absolutely loves Justin Fields or Trey Lance or Mac Jones, whoever it may be. But I think it's more than just safe. I think it's actually very exciting for the Atlanta Falcons to get Kyle Pitts in that building.
I would agree with you. Cincinnati seems to be a Penei Sewell, Jamar Chase marketplace, but what do you hear there? What do you think? It's always kind of like doing fact finding in Siberia, in Bengaldom, because they're kind of a black hole of information. But what
you covered them for years, and it's like now it's Duke Tobin, and it's the owner still involved, and it's Zach Taylor, and it's Katie Blackburn, and a few others, Brian Callahan, the offensive coordinator. But like at first I said it was Jamar Chase because I heard that Burrow loved Jamar Chase, and the more you hear from teams, it's like, no, you're taking Sewell. Like, you protect Burrow off the knee injury.
Yeah.
how he plays so fearlessly. And Sewell, though he didn't play last year, which would give me caution, and he's a little bit raw, is being compared to Taylor Lewan and some of the other athletic freaks that we see at left tackle, that this guy is that good. And if that's the case, you plug him in there and you still have Tyler Boyd, you still have T. Higgins, and Burrow could still throw the rock to those guys. I would think it's Sewell at this point, 10 days out.
Miami is interesting at 6 because I think they moved from 12 to 6, figuring that they didn't want to have a wing and a prayer to get one of the top 4 weapons, 3 tight ends or 3 receivers, 1 tight end. And now under our scenario, they could be sitting there and take any wide receiver in this draft, which I'm sure that Chris Grier and Brian Flores would love.
Yeah, I thought it was very risky when they did it, because I said, what if Pitts and Chase are gone? And then now you're looking at Waddle or Smith. And I think there's a big drop off on most boards from Chase to Waddle and Smith. But if it works out this way, they thread this needle perfectly. And they also have that 18th pick if they want to protect Tua with an offensive lineman or get a defensive player to suit what they need on that end. But I think it's Jamar Chase. And unless the Nick Saban, Bill Belichick tie of Smith and Waddle and something got to Flores through those, there's so many connections. It's incestuous almost with Alabama and the Belichick guys, that there's some way that like they love Waddle or they love Smith. But I would think Jamar Chase, the number 1 wide receiver, just about every board I've spoken to teams with, would be the pick there. And I don't think Dolphins fans would shake many fists. It would actually be an incredible manipulation of the draft prospect to get who they wanted and still trade back, trade up, and pick up a first-round pick in the process.
Look, I think that if you gave Chris Grier sodium pentothal after this draft, he might say, we might have rather had Kyle Pitts than Jamar Chase. However, if you think about this, they will have ended up trading from 3 to 6 and getting Jamar Chase if this happens, and also still getting a 1 and a 3 for the future, because they were not taking a quarterback. If they stayed at 3, they were going to take one of these 4 big weapons. And that's what I really, really like, how Chris Grier has worked the draft in recent years, going back to Laramie Tunsil. And he's just totally, totally unafraid. And if I were Miami, and look, there's still doubt about Tua Tagovailoa and whether he's the guy long term, but I'd be pretty comfortable in if Chris Grier were the architect who had to get us out of whatever hole we're in.
Yeah, it is a dangerous dance, though, because say you wanted Pitts, you had him at 3. Like, that's the only thing. If you had Pitts as your number 1 guy, maybe you got a little cute, and now you have Chase, who's a wide receiver, and there's a million of them in the league.
Here's the question for you. Here's the question to ask, okay? Would you trade, like at the end of this draft, would you trade Jamar Chase a 1 and a 3 for Kyle Pitts?
You probably.
I wouldn't. But
you probably take that.
You got to turn the picks into players, but
you're right. You're right. It depends. I mean, look, if Pitts is what we're hyping him up to be, well, then maybe they'll regret it. But you're right. If you get 2 first-round picks, a third, and one of the first-round picks is Jamar Chase, I don't think you complain.
Do you? I don't get a great read on Detroit right now, other than Detroit, Carolina, and Denver. I hear the exact same mantra. They really want somebody to go up and get their
trade. Yeah, Detroit. Everything I've heard is trade. They only have 6 picks this draft. They're in a total rebuild mode. So, who wants one of the quarterbacks? Who wants Jalen Waddle? Come on and get him. So, I'm doing a mock draft. I know that Arizona has been very, very proactive in like win now mode. I know New England might be a team that might be moving up. Like, let's get some guys, but there are not many aggressive teams in the league right now, and so it's going to be this interesting dance for Brad Holmes in his first year as GM. Do you just take the best player available, and that could be Rashawn Slater, or it could be Jalen Waddle, or do you trade back and try to pick up another first-round pick from one of these teams in the teens and the 20s who might want one of the quarterbacks or even Jalen Waddle? I think there are teams who might want to trade up to get Jalen Waddle.
Yeah. Carolina is interesting for me because I think you made the point about Detroit wanting draft picks. I know Carolina wants more draft picks, and they are almost right in that sweet spot where somebody can trade up. There's going to be a quarterback left at 8. And there could be a gold rush. Washington at 19, Chicago at 20, New England at 15. Who knows? And look, I had a note in my column this week that basically said Bill Belichick has never used a 1 on a quarterback in 26 drafts. He has never drafted a quarterback ever higher than pick 62. So, the logical thing is to say, well, he's not moving up to get a quarterback. If one falls to him, who knows? But in my opinion, with the Patriots, the reason that I just don't know is, all bets are off after watching them spend like Fort Knox this year.
Totally different. When they come out of the gates and they're signing Nelson Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne to huge contracts and going for 2 tight ends, you're thinking, all right, well, then rip it all up. Look, the truth of the matter is at 8, Carolina is really interesting because I do think there's a chance that both Fields and Lance or Mac Jones, 2 of the 3 are available, and teams might be looking to trade up. But I would look at Carolina, and I know this is not going to be a popular opinion, but all the reports came out that were like, all right, they're going to either pick up Sam Darnold's extension or 5th-year option, and they're also going to probably extend him. That's what I've been hearing. It hasn't happened yet. So what if Matt Rule, and remember, they were very aggressive to get Matt Stafford, didn't get him. They were very much in talks for Deshaun Watson, or at least they were interested. I don't even know if Houston was engaging. They'd made it public that they were in those talks. What if they really highly regarded Justin Fields and he's sitting there at 8? And they've got Sam Darnold, who is making $11 million the next 2 years. They haven't done anything as far as make any commitment to him, and he was their 3rd choice as far as veteran quarterbacks go. And they give up nothing to get him. They give up a 2nd, a 4th, and a 6th. So I actually think Carolina, and it might be smokescreen or it might just be me talk, but no, I think they could go quarterback. I still think that if Matt Rule, who knows the college landscape as well as anyone else does in this draft, absolutely loves Justin Fields and he's sitting there at 8, why not? He hasn't had his quarterback yet. And Sam Darnold almost feels like, not that they settled for him, but they certainly weren't the aggressors for Sam Darnold.
Yeah. I like that. I like that logic. Do you feel somewhat the same way about Denver at 9? Because obviously Drew Lock is not a guy who was drafted by the new general manager. He's been a C to somewhere between a C- and a C+ quarterback since he's taken the job. They probably have their doubts about whether he's the guy. If you're Denver and one of these guys is there, what are you thinking?
I think you have to think about it long and hard. I also think if you're George Payton, who is valued as one of the best evaluators in the league over the last 20 years or 10 years at least, when he was with Miami and Minnesota, do I want the 5th quarterback in this draft class as my guy? Is that what I want? The 5th one. Now, if that 5th quarterback happens to be the guy that you had 2nd on your board, then yeah, great. But it can't just be Mac Jones is sitting here and we're at 9. And if we don't take him, we don't get a quarterback that we want in the first round. It has to be a match of what they rank their players, their board, and it's there. But absolutely, they're in the market for a quarterback. I don't know how they couldn't be. And, they made a call about Matt Stafford as well. It wasn't as highly publicized as Carolina's, but they at least inquired when it came out. And to me, that's all I need to know, that they're at least in the quarterback market and they're not 100% all in on Drew Lock.
Yeah. I don't want to go over every team.
It is fun, though. Come on.
Dallas really interests me because this is a year where, logically, can you imagine Dallas, the bottom 3 or 4 defensive teams in the NFL last year, and all of a sudden they have the 10th pick in the draft? And imagine you have your choice of every defensive player on the board.
I think it's going to happen. I think
it's amazing. But on the other side,
Rashawn Slater might be sitting there.
If Rashawn Slater is sitting there and their offensive line is, I wouldn't say it's in tatters, but man, they fell apart last year.
No, they just paid $140 million on a quarterback. So you might want to help protect him. I also think, everyone thinks pass rusher. It's not a good year for pass rushers. I spoke to one team who had Olajari as their top pass rusher. And I was like, Olajari, I don't even have him in most first rounds in the mock, but he's a Georgia pass rusher. And there's no consensus pass rusher. So whether it's Kwity Paye or Rousseau or Phillips, I don't know if Micah Parsons, I don't know if the Dallas Cowboys are rushing the envelope with that. That said, 2 really good corners this year, Surtain and J.C. Horn. So maybe those are the picks. But I think it's going to take a lot of restraint from Jerry Jones here because he's going to have the choice of any defensive player, I think, at 10, and he might want to go offense yet again.
He always does. He loves offense. I mean, there's no way they can take a skilled player, but I actually would say if Rashawn Slater is there, they probably should take him.
Yeah.
Tell me what, if anything, let's homogenize. What, if anything, in say the next 10, New England 15, Washington 19, the Giants 11. What, if anything, really interests you, or do you feel confident about?
I think the Giants are going to be interesting at 11, and I think everyone assumes if Devontae Smith is on the board or Rashawn Slater's on the board, it's a slam dunk. I wouldn't be shocked if Surtain or Horn, the two top corners, are there, that Joe Judge and those guys pounce on that as well. Just, you can never have enough elite cornerbacks. And even if they have Bradbury and Adoree Jackson, the fact that Joe Judge comes from the SEC, where he was for years at Mississippi State, at Alabama, he's got a relationship with Kirby Smart from their time together. Now on that Giant staff, it's all Alabama guys. I mean, it's all guys he had at Alabama with him. It's Jeremy Pruitt, who was the Tennessee head coach, is on the Giant staff. If they value one of those two elite cornerbacks, I think the Giants could go corner, and I think the New York market would go nuts. I don't know what Dave Gettleman's going to do, but I think I wouldn't be shocked with all the connections that they have down there that if Surtain was on the board at 11, the Giants might just say, let's take the best corner in this draft. Let's just go get him. I think the Eagles are interesting. I could see them trading back again.
Let me ask you one quick thing about the Giants. One quick thing. This might be illogical. I've heard some stuff about them and Jalen Phillips. Seems too high, but what do you heard that at all or not?
Yeah, they were at the pro day, and everyone assumed it was going to be, for Rousseau or if Phillips ran a 4.40, and Joe Judge was there. And I remember talking to sources in New York, and they're like, it's Jesse Armstead, it's Joe Judge, and they're there to see the two pass rushers. So you don't send the head coach to go, scout two players that you might not really be interested in at 11. So it's absolutely possible, especially if you blew them away at that pro day.
Eagles maybe try to go down again, or
I think down. I think there are a couple of reports
there and take the receiver if one's left.
I see down. I think someone might want Devontae Smith or Jalen Waddle if they're there, and I could see them looking to trade down. They have 11 picks. They're in a complete rebuild right now as far as that goes, and I don't think they're a receiver away. I would see them looking to trade down and collect more picks.
Yeah. And how about beyond that? I mean, you had a really interesting thing in your first mock where you had the Patriots trading up to 4. I take it you get the feeling that the Patriots are basically a real wild card in this draft.
Yeah, because I'm doing another mock draft, and I don't have them trading up to the top 10, but I do have them trading up with Philly, and that's to get Devontae Smith out of Alabama. I don't think they're done looking to get pass catchers and weapons. They brought in a few with the two tight ends and Bourne and Aguilar, and I know they still like N'Keal Harry up there. They have confidence he could be good, but you consider Belichick and Saban, and this kid's a Heisman Trophy winning wide receiver, and he's a bona fide number one. If he's there in the teens, and Belichick had an interesting quote on Friday when he met with the media. He said, sometimes you get these prospects and you don't think they're going to be on the board where you are, and you're sitting at 15 and you thought they'd be gone 7 or 8, but here they are at 12 or 13, and everyone interpreted he was talking about a quarterback. I looked at it differently. I'm like, I think there might be some blue chip players in this draft that he's like, if they fall out of the top 10, we got to be creative, because I think the Eagles are going to be looking to trade back, and you might have the Vikings looking to trade back. And I just could see Belichick jumping a couple spots and getting a Devontae Smith or someone else that he values at a different position than quarterback as well.
How do you think either one of the quarterbacks, whoever it is after number 3, could either one of them plummet? Could we see an Aaron Rodgers this year or no?
I don't know. And I don't want to take the fifth on that. I just, there's a couple of them. There's Aaron Rodgers. There was Brady Quinn that one year where everyone had him as top 10. And then it's like, well, then what's the team? Like, who matches up well? Yeah. So the only guy that I really see that with might be Mac Jones if the 49ers pass on him. I don't know if that's everyone's cup of tea. So he might slip, and I don't think the Patriots would let him slip past 15. I would think that there'd be an interest in him. But Justin Fields, I have him going to Carolina right now in my head, but I don't know. I just think there's too many teams that would be willing to take a waiver on all 5 of these guys in the teens and they could trade up to get him. I just don't see him plummeting to the 20s or the late 20s.
Last question for you. Is there anything else that America should know when you download the Peter Schrager brain 10 days out from the draft?
Let's think what would be good to throw out there. That the wide receivers are interesting, and I think the top 3 are pretty set in stone. There is a negative and a big negative on just about every other one of them that is being talked about in the first round. So I'm shocked and very interested to see how that goes. You might see a guy like Kadarius Toney, who might have some off the field stuff he has to address, tumble into the second round. You might see a guy like Rondale Moore, who was this wonderful wide receiver at Purdue, but the past 2 years didn't have the same production, tumble out of the first round because of the lack of size that he has. There's all these receivers in this draft, and I think it might be a little light on receivers in the first round. When I've seen mock drafts have like 7 or 8 of them go in the first round, I'm not sure it's going to go that way. I think some of these guys might slip out of the first round just because of the abundance and depth of the position.
Well, you remember obviously in 2019 when you had truly great receivers like A.J. Brown, like Deebo Samuel, like DK Metcalf, like Terry McLaurin go beyond the first round. And look, I remember that year in the draft, I forget, it was Kuiper or McShay. Somebody said, this is the best year for receivers I've ever seen. And then last year, somebody said, this is the best wide receiver draft in history. And, Justin Jefferson in the 20s and all that. And now this year, you're hearing the exact same thing. And so when I hear that, I say, well, good. I'm going to address something else in the first round. And then there's 10 guys who could go in the second and third. I'll get my receiver then. If I'm looking at receivers, that's my attitude, because you have a chance every single year in the last, say, 3 years to get a really good, not just an okay, but a really good receiver in the second or third round.
There's a couple guys, Rashad Bateman and Elijah Moore at Ole Miss, who I think will go first round, late first round maybe. Those guys might be in the teens, might be in the 20s, fine. But then there's this whole, like you're talking about a dozen wide receivers that I've had mentioned to me. A guy named Tutu Atwell out of Louisville, who's 150 pounds and plays wide receiver, but is a burner. Like he might go second round. It is such a glut of good, talented wide receivers. But I think to your point, it's supply and demand, almost like the running back position, where do I need to take one in the first round when I know there's so many talented ones that could be there in the second and third?
Last thing, Kyle Trask, Davis Mills, Kellen Mond. Who's the 6th quarterback picked?
I've had Davis Mills because I've had a couple teams tell me if he's healthy and all stuff, but like I couldn't tell you in good faith that I know which one. I think it's one of those deals. It's a cup of tea. Which one you want on your team? I think Trask makes a lot of sense as the first one to go, but Mond and Mills are both very highly valued by NFL evaluators in that day 2, day 3 range.
Yeah. Kyle Trask is really interesting. He's one of the coolest stories. Imagine you're going to get picked in the second or third round and you never started a game in high school.
Didn't play in high school.
It's the most bizarre thing. He was the backup to De'Aaron King, the quarterback at Miami.
Isn't that crazy? And then comes and think about the receivers where you're watching this is an interesting point on Trask. I was talking to a team that might be looking for a quarterback, maybe not day 1. They said, we knew Kyle Trask, but then you watch the Pitts and Toney tape and you're watching a lot of Kyle Trask and you're like, I kind of like him. I like what he brings. Yeah. It's one of those deals where having 2 star wide receivers might take the attention off them and onto you. And you're saying, wait, that's a really well thrown ball.
Yeah. Hey, I talked to Trask over the weekend and he's a very kind of yes, sir, no, sir, unquotable, very safe guy. But he did say one thing that I thought was really, really smart when I said to him, so do you care where you're going to go? All this stuff. And he goes, hey, look, the only thing I want to do is to go to the right team for me. And I don't care at all what number it is. And that's the right answer. How many quarterbacks, going back to Archie Manning, how many quarterbacks' careers have been ruined because they were taken by the wrong team, maybe too early or whatever, so.
It's smart. And I think he's a smart quarterback. I think Davis Mills is a really smart quarterback. I'm interested to see who goes where and how goes where. But honestly, I think this is, as Gil Brandt said in your column when we started this whole thing off, very unpredictable draft. And yet a lot of intrigue because of the lack of information that everybody has. We're all on an equal playing field right now. We'll really truly see who the best evaluators in the league are.
Yeah. Peter Schrager, thanks so much. This was really a lot of fun. We do it every year and we have a good time.
You're the best. Usually we're doing it at the owners' meetings, sipping on some Starbucks. So I know you're in
Maybe
Brooklyn
next
as well.
year.
Maybe next year. I was going to say, we could do it in Brooklyn or we could do it somewhere else, but it's always an honor. I love coming on with you.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.